What's up guys, and welcome to my RIN TOHSAKA release guide. In this video I'm taking over everything you do need to know in order to understand End Builder, including a kit overview, best Lightcones, best relic sets and Planar ornaments, main stat and substat goals, and finally general team building ideas. Her basic attack does quantum damage based off her attack to a designated enemy. Her regular skill will do quantum damage based off her attack to a designated enemy. Her ultimate does quantum damage equal to 600% of her attack to one enemy and 200% of her attack to other targets. Recovers a skill point and increases damage taken by all enemies by 20% for 3 turns. Her talent gives RIN 20 gem energy entering battle. An ally on the team consuming or recovering skill point will increase their crit damage by 70% for 2 turns. Every skill point consumed or recovered will give RIN 1 gem energy. RIN holding 15 or more gem energy or having 7 or more skill points will enhance her skill. Her enhanced skill does quantum damage equal to 90% of her attack to all enemies, then will consume 3 gem energy to do an additional quantum damage equal to 90% of her attack to a random enemy, and will trigger until gem energy is less than 3 or no more targets with HP left is on the field. Repeats up to 33 cycles. If current skill points are greater than 2, it will consume it down to 2. For every point consumed, will give it 2 gem energy. Her unique joint follow-up attack with Archer is able to be used when Archer uses his skill 5 times in a row, or if skill points are 3 or fewer. The joint attack has to also not been previously used. If conditions are met, they will launch a joint follow-up attack that does 300% of both their attacks respectively. Recovers 4 skill points for the team as well. The joint follow-up attack can trigger once with the trigger count resetting at the end of Rin's turn. Her technique gives 10 gem energy at the start of the next battle. For her traces, her A2 will increase the upper limit of skill points by 2 with Rin on the field. Rin's own attack will increase by 150% and quantum res pen by 15%. If Archer's on the team, he also gets the effect. Her A4 increases Rin's speed by 20% for 3 turns when entering battle or using enhanced skill. And her A6 will give Rin 12 gem energy when using ultimate. For Eidolons, her E1 will make it to where if an instance of enhanced skill consumes 30 or more gem energy, she will gain an equal amount of shadow gem. Holding shadow gem will enhance the skill. Enhanced skill will consume all shadow gem. Doesn't trigger the effect that converts skill points into gem energy and will not consume gem energy. Her E2 increases Rin's own skill damage by 30%, and Rin being on the field will make all allies skill damage become 130% of the original damage. Her E4 makes the crit damage effect from her talent on Rin herself stack 2 times, and her E6 increases Rin's all-type res pen by 20%. Ultimate will give 24 gem energy and 1 extra turn. For her best Lightcones, overall her best one in both roles is her signature, providing 18% crit rate. Character consuming 4 or more skill points at a single turn gives the wearer Radiant Crown for 3 turns, which will make all allies damage dealt ignore 20% of the target's defense, and skill damage dealt by the wearer will do an increased 72% damage, and effects of same type cannot stack. Very simple yet very effective, makes her easier to build with 18% crit rate. The requirement is also anyone on the team, so if it's a main DPS playstyle, Rin herself is going to be consuming the skill points. If it's a sub DPS, Archer is going to be burning them. Very easy to get the Radiant Crown effect. And now with that buff off for the entire battle is pretty much just 20% defense ignore for the team, which is really good for any playstyle. As long as you're not overcapping with it, it's going to be a good damage increase, especially around the 70% or higher. And also, Rin's own damage from skill is going to get a big increase, which you don't focus on much in the sub DPS role, but for main DPS, it's a very big upgrade. So nonetheless, for main or sub DPS, her signature is far and none the best. On the more sub DPS side, a Noxa Lightcone is good, with 10 energy at the start of the wearer's turn, and also an enemy target being attacked by the wearer will decrease that enemy's defense by 12% for 2 turns. Unfortunately, the 60% damage is not something that Rin can achieve, as she doesn't implant weakness. However, the extra energy is nice and helpful, and then extra defense shred will make the team do more damage, including Rin herself. This also is the only way to enable the Master Smith relic set, which is one of her best options when paired with this in the sub DPS role. So Nox's Lightcone is very much used on her, primarily for the sub DPS. For main DPS, you don't really want to do it. For own damage, the Herda's Lightcone is also good. 12% crit rate, 60% to the wearer's skill and ultimate damage when the wearer uses ultimate, and 1 skill point back if the ultimate consumed was more than 140 energy, which it is. So also makes her easier to build, amplifies her main source of damage of skill, and also the ultimate, which does do pretty solid damage. Unfortunately, it doesn't impact the follow-up attack, but that's fine. So this is more focused on her own personal damage. And that extra skill point you are able to recover is nice, especially on the sub DPS role where you're burning a lot more skill points than you normally would. For generic damage increase, you could use Today is Another Peaceful Day, which is able to increase the wearer's damage based off points of energy, each point being 0.20% with a max of 160. As 5, it is 0.40%. Rin gets the full effect of the Lightcone as her energy is exactly 160. So it's just going to be a generic damage increase, so her skill will do more damage, the follow-up attack, the ultimate, everything. So if you have this laying around, this is also a good option, especially for personal damage. And in the sub DPS role, you can use Eternal Calculus, increases Ware's attack by 8% and an additional 4% for every enemy target hit after using an attack that stacks up to 5 times and will last until the end of the attack. Hitting 3 or more enemies will increase this unit's speed by 8% for 1 turn, S5 at 12% attack, additional effect of 8%, and speed increase of 16%. The attack increase is pretty inconsistent since you're not always going to be hitting the max amount of enemies, especially since Rin will often just use like basic attack on her turn. So it's 12% attack and then you can get 20%, 28%, whatever. But anytime you do use the enhanced skill, if there's 5 enemies, you get the full. If you use ultimate, you can get the full. But that obviously would depend on how many enemies are on the field. And then so the attack buff could be good or it could be on the lower side. The extra speed is also good if you're able to keep uptime on it, only in the sub DPS role. By the way, only use this Lightcone in the sub DPS role because the speed effect is useless. And there's just better options compared to just the attack percent because the entire speed part will be useless in the main DPS role. But for sub DPS, the speed is good, especially when you're trying to build her faster. So this is an option on the lower end for sub DPS Rin. For Rin's best relic sets, this can change depending on if you're doing main DPS or in general if you're optimizing for more damage on the archer teams. But for archer teams, I highly recommend just running 2-piece speed and 2-piece speed and not focusing on her damage too much because yes, she can add up to a decent amount of damage, but archer is the biggest focus of that team. So building her on 2-piece speed allows her to be a lot easier to build for speed requirements and can help you hit the optimal rotations. So you can do 2-piece diviner with 2-piece warrior goddess, 2-piece relieved ordeal, or 2-piece hacker space, any of those for 2-piece speed and 2-piece speed. That's how I would go about for archer team specifically. The rest is going to be for damage / main DPS. And the best one for damage overall is going to be the Genius set. 2-piece increasing quantum damage by 10%. 4-piece provides 10% defense ignore. And if the enemy has quantum weakness, an additional 10%. For primarily main DPS Rin, stacking defense shred / defense ignore closest to 100% as possible is going to be a big goal. That's how you really get that increase in how you see all those kind of one-shots. Without it, it's going to be so much more difficult, and Quantum Set is going to help a lot with that. If it's pushing you to 80s, 90s, and especially the 100s, it's going to always be best. And the 2-piece does actually impact her damage since she is Quantum. So best result of damage, even just as a sub DPS overall, the Genius Set is going to be good. However, if you do want technically a better 4-piece as a sub DPS, specifically if you are using the Anoxa Cone, that would be 4-piece of the Master Smith set. 2-piece is useless. 4-piece is able to increase the wearer's crit damage dealt to enemy targets in the defense reduction state by 28%. And then when the wearer inflicts defense reduction state on an enemy target, all allies will gain Comburn for 2 turns, which will increase damage dealt by allied targets by 15% and can be triggered again after the wearer uses an attack. So it does increase Rin's own damage by a bit, with making her do 28% more damage. Sorry, not damage, crit damage dealt to enemies that are in the defense shred state. But the wearer does need to inflict the state for the actual effect to give everyone more damage dealt. She cannot do this without the Anoxa Cone, which is why the Anoxa Cone is the only way to enable this. So if you are running an Anoxa Cone, you can very much use this set for the best sub DPS results, as long as you are hitting the other stats needed. Scholar set is a good old reliable for skill DPS. 2-piece is 8% crit rate, 4-piece is 20% damage to skill and ultimate for the wearer, and after using ultimate, an additional 25% for the next skill. So this is very simple. It increases her main source of damage being the skill, and also is able to impact the ultimate. Also makes her easier to build with the 2-piece. Unfortunately, wouldn't be impacting the actual follow-up damage at all, but it's mainly something you're focusing on, and if you're running this on a main DPS, then you're not going to see the follow-up attack anyways. You can also run the Duke set, which increases the damage up by follow-up attacks by 20%. And the 4-piece is able to increase the wearer's attack when they use a follow-up attack for every time that follow-up attack does damage by 6%. Stacks up to the total of 8 times, lasting for 3 turns, and is removed next time the wearer uses a follow-up attack. So this is usable because she does have that joint follow-up attack, and it's only usable then unless you're using like an E2 M blade setup for some reason on like a main DPS thing, which is possible but not always there. But since you do use that follow-up attack with Archer, you're not able to fully stack this up, but you still are able to get a good attack increase. And that's going to last for a whole 3 turns, because then by then you're going to use the follow-up attack again. It's going to refresh. So you'll still keep up that attack buff, at least on that sub DPS team. So this also does increase her damage. Unfortunately, the 2-piece will only impact the follow-up, and then the 4-piece will be able to be a generic attack buff, so you will have more stuff there. This is the one I'd recommend least, though. I'd highly recommend, if you're doing anything DPS related, Genius set always, unless you're already overcapping. For sub DPS, if you are running an Oxycone, then always Master Smith, and then if not that, I would just do Scholar. Specifically for Archer teams, it would just be 2-piece speed and 2-piece speed, and then the Duke set would just be the last option I recommend, but it still is an option. Then for Planar Ornaments, you can really just give her any of the supportive sets. With Archer, you can just go ahead and throw on Penacony for the 5% energy regen and 10% damage for all the allies that are the same type as the wearer. You can also run Lushaka for 12% attack for the character position first, and also 5% energy regen for the wearer. Those will be the main two you'd want to do. But another really good one that also focuses on her damage a bit is the Converging Star set. For 24% attack when the wearer uses a follow-up attack for 2 turns, enemy target gain defeated will increase crit damage for the team by 12% in the current battle, and the effect does not stack. So this is simply used just once the follow-up attack for their joint attack procs, you would get the buff. So Rin can do more damage there, and you're also providing 12% crit damage for allies. So there's a bit of supportive effect going there just by defeating an enemy, which is going to be very easy. And then for main DPS, you're going to be running Tengoku for 16% crit damage. 3 or more skill points being consumed in the same turn will give an additional 32% for 3 turns. So you can get up to a 48% increase to crit damage for how you do player. You can also just run Rudolin Arena for main DPS as well, as it does provide 8% crit rate and buffs her main source of damage being skilled by 20%. For the main stats on the relics, for the body, you want to run crit rate. For the feet, you will only do speed if you are running her as an archer sub DPS. If you're running her as a main carry, you always will want attack percent. For the orb, you want quantum damage. And for the link rope, as a sub DPS, run energy regen. As a main DPS, run attack percent. Now for subsets. First, we gotta talk about why speed is required on Rin and how you would go about it. So ideally, you want Rin to act before Sparkle on archer teams, just so you can always have the joint attack ready. Because if you remember, it's only going to be usable after Rin's turn does end past the first one. So once you have it proc, then it'll be on cooldown until Rin's next turn ends. So you're going to want to have Rin be able to go, so you can refresh it, get that extra damage in throughout the battle, and also those 4 skill points to shoot even more. So in this case, for a sub DPS, you would build her as fast as you possibly can to the point she does outspeed your Sparkle. If your Sparkle is at, let's say, 164 speed, Rin would need about 145, because do remember she does give herself 20% speed when she enters combat or after using enhanced skill. So you just want her in battle to be constantly 1 or more speed past your Sparkle, and then Sparkle doesn't outspeed her. However, if your Sparkle is on an insanely fast build, like 2p speed plus Eagle, or not plus Eagle, but if you have 2p speed, or just an Eagle setup, high speed, Von Walk, all that kind of stuff, E1, and it's really just impossible for you to really build Rin to that speed and above. If you're going to do that route, just be sure your Sparkle doesn't overlap twice before your Rin does act. Otherwise, you're just going to have a significant drop in performance. Just be sure for every time Sparkle would act, Rin isn't going to not be able to get a turn 2 times when Sparkle goes. So pretty much it would be Sparkle, then Rin, then Sparkle, then Rin. But ideally, you can get Rin faster than your Sparkle, so it's Rin, Sparkle, which is going to be Archer's turn, Rin, Sparkle, Archer, Rin, Sparkle, Archer. And then you'll get the joint attack off properly. Then you would focus on crit rate, crit damage, attack percent. Crit rate, get it to as close as 100% as possible. If you're running as a sub DPS, that might be a bit difficult, but just try to get as much as you can. Crit damage also just as high as you can. Getting around 130% is going to be fine. Attack as a sub DPS around 25 to 2700 is going to be good. If you're running the attack boots as a main DPS, in that case, you're looking at 3000 plus. For main DPS specifically, crit rate 100%, always non-negotiable. Also ignore speed entirely. You're always going to have Sparkle, so that's not going to be a concern. Speed is not an actual substat goal, but yeah, crit rate 100% for main DPS, non-negotiable. Crit damage, you're looking at a bit higher, around 140%. Attack percent, and your just attack stat in general before battle, you're looking at around 3000. If you can get it higher than those, then obviously the better, but just try to get it around that or higher. Now for some general team building ideas. This of course would change depending on if you're running her main DPS or sub DPS, but the teams don't inherently change too much. So I'm going to start off with sub DPS since most people are looking for that. If you were to actually run as a sub DPS, the character on the team would also be Archer. So the first 2 slots are filled with Rin and Archer. Then as you can expect, Sparkle is still very much a non-negotiable teammate. She is going to be why Archer hits super damn hard and also helps a ton with the skill points, even though there's ways to make up for the skill points, especially with the joint attacks. Sparkle is just very irreplaceable. Last slot would go to sustain. You can use either a Huo if you want to benefit both their damage plus the energy, or just run Danang and then put the bondmate buff on Archer. So the team would look something like this. If you're doing sustainless, you would sub out the sustain slot. You can use someone like RMC because the occasional action advance is fine. You can slot an Astral or Mortanix Blade as well. Both of them work good. Although if you are running Mortanix Blade and he is on the Master Smith set, do remember if you're running Rin on that as well, the effect of the set does not stack. You can also just use more generic options like Tribi or Cypher as well, or OG Silverwolf. Those would be fine. If you really need a substitute for Sparkle, one of the only options is kind of Hanya. If you really do need those skill points, that still does hold true, but it's going to be so much worse. You can still use someone like Sunday or Bronya in that spot as well, but it's just going to perform so much worse, so that's why I don't necessarily recommend it. Not having Sparkle is still going to be a very big drop-off. Main DPS teams are not super different, and in this case, Sparkle is very much even more required. Without Sparkle, main DPS Rin is going to fall off a lot. And then Ceridra is also very important for main DPS Rin, especially if you have Ceridra E1 and cloning the nuke so you can get 2 nukes. Rin hyper carry is often sustainless if you can, so last slot could go to someone like RMC, Tribi, Mortanix, the generic options that we did talk about. Robin also works in that spot, and then if you are doing sustain, then you still just run either Danheng or Huohuo. And that is the full release RIN TOHSAKA guide. I do hope you found this video helpful. If you did, dropping a like would be greatly appreciated. If you're new to the channel or have done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell for future videos like this along with all the types of style content. And I'll see you later. Peace out.